You're listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Welcome back to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans from the West Coast. I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Thursday, November 18th. And I'm very happy to be joined once again by fellow South Stands contributor Paige Van Horn from Denver. PBH, how's it going, my friend?
It's going well, buddy.
Awesome.
Really well.
Excellent. Good to be with you this evening. We will be without our good friend Chad Plummer. He's got the evening off, but we look forward to having him back on the pod next week.
Just everyone on the South Stands, keep an eye out on your phone. There could be an Amber Alert for Mr. Plummer in Las Vegas. So
in the Las Vegas area?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, of course, we're here today to preview number 4, Ohio State's matchup with number 7, Michigan State in the Horseshoe this coming Saturday. But before we dive into that, we didn't really get a chance, PVH, you and me, to recap Ohio State-Purdue. We talked at halftime in that game, and we were both like, wow, Ohio State, things were rolling pretty good. So our listeners already know where I stand on that result from Sunday's pod, but I wanted to kick the can over to you to get your view of that game. Why don't you give me your high-level thoughts about that game?
Yeah, I know there was some issues on the defensive side. I think that was just an anomaly. I think, like you said, that was an angry team. Mm-hmm. That was just the team I think we've been looking for and wanting to see, maybe against Nebraska, but, we've seen flashes of it previously. When that team's rolling like that, they're unstoppable. I mean, maybe Georgia can stop them, but I don't know anybody else that could potentially stop them. It was interesting, though. I do think the fumble that Purdue had, I think it was 14-7 at that point, and they brought in that quarterback, and next play, that very first play, he fumbled it, and then the next play, Henderson took it to the house. And then it was 21-7, and that game was, for all intents and purposes, over at that point. However, had that fumble not happened, it could have turned into a shootout. It could have been closer. I mean, I still think Ohio State wins going away. The other miscue they had on special teams on the kickoff was just, backbreaking. You could not recover from it. I don't think it would have ultimately mattered, but instead of the game being, just a blowout, we could have been sweating it out a little bit.
That's true.
In the fourth quarter. And so, the defense backing off, it was a little concerning, but I just, again, it comes down to motivation, for me, when I look at stuff like that, like, why would a team not be up for this or that? There's only 12. It's hard to stay motivated when your offense literally scores at will. Yeah. Right. You're playing this basically prevent defense the entire second half. And you're playing into what Purdue does really, really well, right?
True.
And, sort of projecting forward. Yeah. I mean, because, we don't need to talk about, we'll get to it, right? Like how phenomenal they are with all their weapons. I mean, we're a broken record on that. I think, coming out of it thinking, was that just an anomaly? And is it something to be worried about on the defensive side of the ball? But then I was thinking, they're not going to see another team like that the rest of the season, even if they, make the playoff and, make the final game of the season. They're just not. And so, especially these next few games that are coming up, these are offenses that play directly into what we do best as a defense. Whereas Purdue, that guy, I mean, as a backup quarterback starting the season, he's completing 70% of his passes. Like, he was surgical. So, it was, I was thoroughly, not worried about it. It was a fun game to watch, no stress whatsoever. I thought they'd come out fired up. I think they're going to continue to be fired up, and it was a fun game to watch.
I agree with all that. Aiden O'Connell, interestingly, that's the Purdue quarterback. Yeah, I agree with you. How come more people aren't talking about him? Because, Ohio State isn't the only defense that he lit up. And I said this on Sunday's pod. I mean, you would be hard pressed to find a better statistical line from an opposing quarterback in the shoe than what O'Connell did. 40 of 52 for 390 and 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. I mean, I'm thinking of some of the greatest quarterback performances in the shoe that I can remember over the last like 30 years, right? Like, Baker Mayfield when he came into the shoe back in 2017. I remember Phillip Rivers came in like 2003 and lit us up pretty good. I don't even think their statistical lines were as good as that. And it didn't even matter. That was the thing. He threw for 394 touchdowns on 40 of 52, and it didn't even matter. It barely had an impact on the final outcome, which is crazy to me. But I think that kid's a good quarterback. I'm surprised more people aren't talking about him. Right?
I totally agree. But that's what, losing 3 games will do to you, right? You're just not going to, and playing at Purdue. Now, if Purdue were 8-1, yeah, I mean, hell, I don't know what his season statistical stats are, but I'm sure they're pretty damn impressive. But you got to win, right? And they're not on TV. But to your point, man, like, is he the second best quarterback in the Big Ten? Might be. Yeah. Probably.
I don't think they're going to see another passing offense for sure, certainly for the rest of the regular season and through the Big Ten title game. And I don't know that any of the playoff contenders, save for Alabama, has a passing attack like that, coupled with also a really good play caller and Jeff Brom.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I mean, that was an unusual passing offense that they're not going to see every week in the Big Ten with a good player in David Bell. And I thought they actually did a pretty good job on Bell, all things considered, right? His final line was 11 receptions, but only for 103 yards. And that's kind of like when you go up against a good running back, he gets 100 yards, but it takes like 35 carries to get it. So,
nothing backbreaking by him, right? He's going to get his, right? I mean, they ran some plays like, damn, that was a creative play. Like that first maybe touchdown, like,
yeah, he was wide open.
Fullback, it's just like that was just drawn up beautifully, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes you got to tip your hat, like,
totally.
Damn it, that was super, super creative. And they did expose this on our secondary, that but sometimes you just got to say, hey, man, that was a great play, and you move on.
Yeah. Yeah. I may have overreacted a little bit on Sunday talking about the defense because then I listened to, our friend Bill Landis and some of the other folks whose opinions I listened to pretty closely. And Landis wasn't nearly as concerned. He felt much like you did that Ohio State probably let their foot off the gas with a big, big lead. Also went a little vanilla on defense too. Didn't really try much. But at the same time, I don't want to completely excuse away what we saw. Now they're ranked, Ohio State, 108th nationally in pass defense. If you consider the carryover from last season, right, where we were ranked in the 100s, in pass defense to finish the season. And I referenced what you had said, at the end of last year on the pod, which was that, it's inexcusable for Ohio State to be ranked in the 100s in any statistical category. So, and it was a little troubling for me to see, those receivers being schemed so wide open and our secondary being so confused by what they saw. But overall, here I am bitching about do I sound like the consummate Ohio State fan, right? Complaining about a 4-touchdown win over a ranked opponent.
Right. Yeah. And pretty, not rough conditions, but it was windy out there.
Yeah.
Like in both those guys, Stroud and O'Connell, man, they lit it up
Yeah.
blustery conditions, and it was a fun game to watch. There was no stress. That was the best part.
Yeah, exactly. Fun all the way through, no stress. Great effort out of the running game too. I liked what I saw out of Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson. Yeah. I like what the coaching staff has been doing with Travion Henderson in really, limiting his carries and his workload, because he is a little nicked up. I don't know if you've noticed, right? He's been in that medical tent a few different times over the last few games. He's not a big dude, so I think they've been smart to limit his carries. Only 13 carries last Saturday. You're obviously going to need that kid, right? They've got much bigger fish to fry.
Well, and the contrast with Williams, I think, even though, there's a big drop off between the two, but that guy was running hard.
Yeah.
And, if you take some of the burden off Henderson, and like you said on the pod, right, he's probably going to have to put on 15 pounds to, take the punishment of a full season in the Big Ten. But a phenomenal bounce back game from the offensive line, right? And
they were great.
They were great. And Purdue wasn't a shit defense, right? They ranked like 26, and
that's right.
They took the Greek freak completely out of the game. And
that's right.
I think from an offensive perspective, that was the most encouraging thing, right? The offensive line got it back together. The running game was looking strong.
Yeah.
I do like that 1-2 punch, right, with Williams, even though, Henderson clearly just is a difference maker back there. But
Right.
man, like running Williams behind that line in the third and fourth quarter, you can just wear people down, and I'll take 10, 12 yards a pop every single down. Shit, you take 4 or 5, and that was just coming at will for them.
Yeah. Williams was great. He finally looked healthy. Both he and Master Teague have been injured, in and out of the lineup all year, dealing with, various injuries of sorts. So it was good to see him healthy. Hopefully this is what we get. You give me that Henderson Williams 1-2 punch to go with the passing game. Right. I can't even conceive of a better offensive attack. I mean, they're ready to contend for a championship with that setup. It is interesting. The semifinalists for the Biletnikoff Award were announced today. Only one Buckeye made that, and it was Chris Olave, which was kind of ironic, right? Because I think every Buckeye would tell you that Jackson Smith and Jigba and Garrett Wilson are having better statistical season. I think they're just having bigger impacts from one game to the next than Olave, but it's Olave who gets the nod for the Biletnikoff Award. No knock on Olave. He does lead them in receiving touchdowns this year, and he's a great receiver. And but I thought that was interesting. Garrett Wilson, especially after the way he played, what he showed in that game, to get kind of snubbed for that.
Yeah. I kind of feel like they keep Olave, they set him up for deep balls and, deep posts.
Yeah.
So he doesn't maybe, get as many looks as Wilson and JSN, but, I mean, those awards, right? You take them with a grain of salt.
Totally.
I mean, at least one of them technically all 3 should be on that list. I mean, it's a travesty, but the writers aren't going to do that. And that's why that shit's just bullshit.
Right. Totally. I mean, and it begs the question, how many of those folks are deciding on these things actually watch the games, which often enough that very, very infrequently are they actually watching the games. So, all right. Well, hey, look, great. The Ohio State offensive line showed up, flashed just in time, right? This is what we wanted to see out of that unit heading down the home stretch here. So why don't we turn our attention then to this Saturday's top 10 matchup between number 7 Michigan State and number 4 Ohio State. The line is Ohio State -19. The over-under is 68.5. The game is a noon Eastern kick on ABC. Now, the Buckeyes lead the all-time series between these two schools 34-14, and they come into this game winners of 5 straight over Sparty, including last season's 52-12 laugher in East Lansing. I don't know if you remember this, PVH, but Ohio State had a bunch of COVID absences last year in that game. No Thayer Mumford, no NPF, no Josh Myers, Josh Proctor, Duck Borland, Tyler Friday, and also Ryan Day were all COVID absences for that game. Ohio State had to go into that one with a patchwork offensive line. Larry Johnson was elevated to head coach for the game, and no problem. Buckeyes jumped out to a 35-zip lead in the third quarter, outgained Sparty 521-261, and it wasn't much of a contest at all. And what a difference a year makes, and the transfer portal makes for head coach Mel Tucker right now in his second season at Michigan State. The Spartans are now 9-1, led by Wake Forest transfer Kenneth Walker III at running back. Walker III leads the country in rushing and seems destined for New York as a Heisman finalist. We'll see how things go in this game for him. Now, he led Sparty to an improbable comeback win over Michigan back on October 30th, rushing for 197 yards and 5 touchdowns. So let's have a look at the stats here for Michigan. They are a pretty potent offense coming into this game. They are 24th nationally in total offense. They average about 450 yards per game. They're 10th nationally in offensive yards per play, averaging 6.83 yards per play. So, pretty explosive. The aforementioned Kenneth Walker III is a big part of what makes this offense go. But, sophomore quarterback Peyton Thorne having a nice season, averaging 246 yards per game, completing 63.4% of his passes, 21 touchdowns to 8 INTs. And Sparty has a pretty good pair of receivers in Jaden Reed, who's 4th in the Big Ten in receiving yards with 829, and Jalen Naylor, who I don't think is going to play in this game. Now, Naylor has not played since the win over Michigan. I don't know if you saw this or not, PVH, in that game. He was spotted on the sidelines in the second half of that game with a cast on his right hand. So not a great sign. He has not played in their last 2 games. I don't think he plays in this one. But, Michigan State has another guy in Reed that Ohio State has to be very mindful of, especially with that, that shaky secondary they've had over the season. Now, on the other side of the ball, Michigan State defensively does not really resemble anything close to those great defenses under Mark D'Antonio. Sparty comes into this game 111th in total defense, giving up 443 per game. Yikes. Now, they're a little more respectable in defensive yards per play, and a lot of folks use defensive yards per play now as kind of the number one metric for measuring defenses. They're 55th nationally in defensive yards per play at 5.38. Still not stellar, right? Still not great. But it's the pass defense where Sparty is just historically bad. They are dead last in the FBS PVH at 130.
Again, like, how is that possible?
Dead last. I don't know.
You can't. You're in the Big Ten. That's just this shouldn't be allowed.
I agree. And I think they actually went out to the transfer portal and got some guys to shore up that secondary, and it has not worked. Giving up 329 yards per game. Again, that's dead last in the FBS, 130th. And that's a key stat to bear in mind in this matchup, obviously. Now, Sparty does do a couple things pretty well on defense, starting with its pass rush. They are 15th nationally in sacks with 33. That's only one sack behind Ohio State, by the way, who's 13th nationally. Pro Football Focus rates the Sparty pass rush 22nd nationally, which is right behind Ohio State at number 21. So Michigan State can get after the quarterback. They're pretty good in that regard. They also have pretty good against the run. They are 20th nationally against the run, giving up 114 yards per game. A couple players I want to shout out on the Sparty defense page, and then I'm going to kick this to you for a concernometer score. Jacob Panasiuk. I'm butchering that name, but he's a defensive end for Sparty. He leads the team with 8 sacks, 63 total pressures, according to PFF. The Greek Freak last week for Purdue, I think he was in the high 40s in total pressures. Panusiak, 63 total pressures. So this dude can get after the quarterback. He's got 8 sacks. Defensive tackle Jacob Slade is another guy to watch on that defensive line. Now, Slade has 32 pressures. So between Slade and Panusiak, they are Sparty's top-graded defenders, according to PFF. They also have a defensive tackle named Simeon Barrow. He's another name to watch. Now, that's if he plays. He's been a little dinged up, and he actually didn't play against Maryland. So good defensive line, statistically speaking, in terms of getting after the quarterback. That's something to be mindful of. Sparty's leading tackler is senior safety Xavier Henderson. Now he leads Sparty also in snaps at 828, so he never leaves the field, and PFF really likes Henderson as well. They grade him as Sparty's 3rd highest defensive player. They got some dudes. Even overall, they, statistically, this defense stinks. They do have some nice pieces on the defense. One last thing here I want to point out. Sparty's schedule breakdown. And I know you have to be careful about applying the transitive property here in college football, but Ohio State and Michigan State have 5 common opponents so far: Nebraska, Rutgers, Indiana, Purdue, and Maryland. Sparty is 4-1 against those opponents, outscoring them 143-88. That's a point differential of 55. Ohio State is 5-0 against those opponents, outscoring them 257-85. That's a point differential of 172. So, again, you can't always apply the transitive property, and, because styles make fights and that sort of thing.
You can a little.
But you can a little, and you can't overlook it, right? I think that tells us a little something there. But those same 5 opponents, a point differential for Ohio State of 172 compared to 55 for Sparty. Okay. Let me know how you see this game. Give me some thoughts, and then why don't you give me your concernometer score?
It's weird, right? Like, I have never been less worried about a top 10 team coming into the shoe in a long time.
Yeah.
I'd say 1, but I'm going to go with my concernometer just being a 2 for a few reasons. Number 1, like I just said, are they really the 7th best team?
Yeah, good question.
If they are, then that's an indictment on the rest of college football. I just think they're there because no one else is very good either. But the bigger reason is what they do well offensively. I think we do the best defensively, right? I think, if you're just going to line up and try and run the ball down our throats, when has that really worked? Maybe, outside of Oregon a little bit this year in a long time. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't work. They're playing right into our strengths. And then on the offensive side of the ball, right? Like you said, like dead last in pass defense against this offense. Right. Good freaking luck with that, right? Like, how's that going to work?
Yeah. Yeah. Just to back up your point here, Paige, Ohio State 13th nationally in rushing defense, giving up only about 106 yards per game. So you're right. That is a strength for this, for that defense. That is the one thing that they do well.
Yeah. It's like a team like Purdue is, not that I ever thought that they would lose that game, right? But they're going to do some things that could expose any defense, and especially our defense. I just don't think Michigan State's going to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So our strengths against their weaknesses, and I think this is a mismatch. I just don't know how, Sparty comes in and pulls this game off. I mean, you can even go to the Gambler's Bible and say, oh, are we looking ahead to Michigan? Something. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this team has found its focus again. I think they're going to be fired up. I just looked at the weather. I think the weather is going to be perfect for what we want to do. I just don't see how Michigan State can hang with us. And it's great because they're ranked 7th, but I'm not buying it.
Yeah. And again, to back your point up, I'm looking at team passing efficiency. Ohio State is 3rd nationally in team passing efficiency. So, obvious strength, not only just for Ohio State, but among the best in the country, top 3 in that regard. So yeah, I'm with you. That is definitely something I looked at too when I was looking at my Concernometer score. The 2 best teams Michigan State has faced so far are Michigan and Purdue. And in the win over Michigan, they were outgained 552 to 395. And they trailed most of the afternoon, had to come back from a 16-point third quarter deficit to win that game. And to their credit, they did. But look, the playoff committee likes to talk about game control, right? They were not in control of that game. They took the lead within, I think, the last 5 minutes. I think they had a couple of early leads in the first half that only lasted a couple of minutes, and then really trailed throughout most of the game until the final, 5 minutes. And then in the loss to Purdue, Sparty never led. They were outgained 594 to 458. The passing numbers they allowed in those 2 games are staggering. Cade McNamara of Michigan, Aiden O'Connell of Purdue combined to complete 69% of their passes for 919 yards and 5 touchdown passes. I mean, I shudder to think what the Ohio State passing game will do to that defense. To your point, right? The playoff committee is billing Sparty as a top 10 team sitting just outside, looking in. I don't think I'm buying Michigan State at this stage of the Mel Tucker regime as a true top 10 team. But, they do have some nice pieces, including, as we've mentioned, Kenneth Walker III, Jaden Reed at receiver, a competent quarterback in Peyton Thorne, a good defensive line that can create pressure. We're also only a couple of weeks removed from back-to-back lackluster performances by the Ohio State offense against Penn State and Nebraska. The Ohio State defense also has not seen a good running back since early September, when it had trouble containing Mo Ibrahim in the opener against Minnesota and C.J. Verdell of Oregon in week 2. Ibrahim and Verdell both went over 160 and for 2 touchdowns each against Ohio State. And in the case of Verdell, he averaged 8 yards a carry in that game. Now, very well documented. Lots of changes have been made since. The hockey line substitutions have gone away. They've identified who their best players are. So I think you would agree. We both feel like, they've improved, but we just need to see it, right, against a quality running back, and they'll get that opportunity, facing Walker. So because of all those things, I'm going to set the dial on the Concernometer right in the middle at a 5, which I think is pretty low considering this is a matchup with a top 10 team.
So I think, they have some nice pieces, but I think, doesn't it take more than nice pieces to beat this team, right?
Yes, it does.
Right. The only way is if something goes terribly wrong, right? I mean, it's the same thing with Purdue. They have nice pieces. Yeah, that's fine. We have nice pieces at every single position. And by the way, in 2/3 of our positions, we have NFL first rounders.
Yeah.
Right. So how does a team like Michigan State come in unless, turnovers or something,
bad weather, right?
The sum of the parts doesn't add up to beat a team like Ohio State. Number one. Number two, I was we will have this exact same conversation next week, right? Yes. Right before Michigan. These are carbon copy teams, and I think you have to do more than, one thing pretty well,
right,
in today's game, especially, if you want to, be playing at the level we're playing at, you know, in the top 4 teams in the country to beat us. And I just don't see it with Michigan State. That's the second point. The third point is, does Mel Tucker sign his new contract before kickoff? Because if I were him, I certainly would try and sign that contract before kickoff, because this could get ugly. And so do we really want to pay a guy $10 million a year for 10 years?
Yeah. And you know, you have
another topic of conversation.
No, I think it's actually pretty appropriate for this discussion, because you know, does that enter as a distraction at all? I mean, you're preparing for the biggest game of the year, a measuring stick game, a game that would vault you right back into the playoff discussion, would put you in the driver's seat to win the Big Ten and get to the Big Ten title game and get to the playoff. And you're negotiating a new contract in the middle of this week of preparation. I mean, I don't know. I know Michigan State is they hear the rumors, right? You know, I mean, Tucker's name has been mentioned in connection with. There's a bunch of prominent jobs are either now opening or opening up this offseason. Florida, LSU. Well, Florida not. We don't know for sure yet, but Mullen is on the hot seat there, right? I mean, it's just a matter of time in his case. LSU's already open, right? USC's already open. So I get it. You know, the administration there is anxious to lock up Tucker. But man, the timing, I don't know. If for no other reason, as a superstitious fan, I just want to put the hex on my coach for this game, right? By doing this. And right, you when we texted about this earlier today, it's a 10-year extension, if not mistaken. And I like the reference, the Charlie Weiss reference, right? Because that's what Notre Dame did, right? They kind of gave him a premature, 10-year extension off a pretty good year, but it was kind of like, he hadn't really sustained any success yet. This is kind of what this feels like with Tucker, right?
It totally does.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I agree. And well, I said it, so I should agree with myself, hopefully, about this feeling a lot like Charlie Weiss. I don't necessarily think it's the wrong play for Michigan State, though.
No.
Even as much as Tucker says this is a destination job, I don't know if it is. No. It's not a bad job, but if they make you one of the top 10, paid college coaches in the country, okay. Is it better than Florida, USC, and LSU? Definitely not. No. But those jobs come with some baggage.
That's true.
And you can go 9-3 in Michigan State, and and
they'll be stoked.
Every fourth year you compete for, a playoff spot. Is that better than going to LSU? And if you're not competing for a playoff spot within year 2, you're on the hot seat.
Yeah. The measuring stick there is not quite as daunting as you said as they are at these other programs. And he's going to be able to get some Ohio kids, right? He's in a pretty fertile, recruiting area, though he is competing with the likes of Ohio State and, Michigan and Notre Dame and stuff. But I think this is what you have to do if you're Michigan State.
I agree.
Under the circumstances, you have to overpay, you have to overcommit to lock him in, especially with these other jobs open.
Yeah, whether or not it's the right thing or not, there's no doubt if they don't do it, one of those other schools are coming after him, and they're coming hard. So you have to buck it up and just bite the bullet and hope it works out. And I have a feeling it will work out. He's definitely a good coach. He's proved that. Mm-hmm. Whatever this season notwithstanding, he did great at Colorado before, he took the Michigan State job. So their hand is being forced. That's the way it goes in college football. Apparently they're just billionaires that are going to write the check, right? They don't care. It's like, I read about the bios of those two guys. The one guy's worth like $6.7 billion, which I've been saying for years, right? Like, that's what you need. You need one billionaire booster that gives a shit about football, and then you can do whatever you want. Who cares? Right?
I had not read that. Oh, that's very interesting. Okay. So yeah, they've got some backers. There's there.
2 of them.
Okay.
Yeah. And they're just like, we got this. Don't worry about it. I mean, the one guy is literally worth $6.7 billion. I forget. They started some like PayPal or something, not PayPal, but something fintech. And it's just absurd. So yeah, why not? And then if I'm Michigan State, I give you that contract. And by the way, your buyout is $20 million a year, because we're not doing this every year. Right.
We're
going to make this just so painful, and then lock them up and then roll the dice. I also think it's kind of in an indirect way an indictment on Harbaugh and Michigan. Like, we're going to be better than them. Like they're not going to play redheaded stepchild in Michigan any longer. And I think
I love it.
Tucker is looking at this like, I got this. This is going to be easy. And, if Michigan were the juggernaut that we all thought they would be or should be with Harbaugh, whatever, maybe you don't take this job. It isn't a destination job, but you dominate Michigan recruiting. You come into Ohio because we recruit at a national level. You take, the guys we don't want, the guys 15 to 20 in the state of Ohio, they're going to be back. They're going to be good. They're going to lose a lot of guys. They'll actually probably be much worse next year than they are this year, unless they kill the portal again.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I was listening to Michigan State's beat writer, Colton Pouncey, I think his name is. He writes for The Athletic, and they are not afraid to really kind of lean on the transfer portal to continue to build out their roster. He said that is a part of their strategy. And they did it this offseason. That's obviously how they got Kenneth Walker the third. And I think Pouncey said 12 or 13 other players to kind of fill out their roster. But obviously, Walker the third is the most prominent of those. Look, there's a blueprint there. Mark D'Antonio showed you the blueprint. Tucker could simply follow that or a version of it. There's success to be had there. You just follow that blueprint.
Yeah.
So very interesting.
I would say D'Antonio was a little, he was Jim Tressel-esque, right? And they're going to win with defense, and their defenses were sick. They were great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Michigan State, and kudos to them, right? Like, we want some freaking competition in the Big Ten, right? Like, pay your guys, outside of Harbaugh, and go for it, man. And try and compete at the highest level. We need that in the Big Ten. Yeah.
Interesting. So I assume that if they're willing to, to give Tucker a 10-year extension and throw all this money at him, that they're also willing to spend money on a staff, because that's another big part of it, right? You gotta, I know, I know your philosophy on paying assistants, on high-priced assistants, but you look around at like Alabama and some of these other elite programs. It is important to have a really highly competent staff. So I wonder if they'll give him enough money to put together a decent staff there as well.
Sure, they will.
All right. Well, why don't we go to score predictions here, Paige? Give me your score prediction.
Man, I'm trying real hard not to call the Buckeyes in the 60s. Like, how are they going to stop us? Good luck.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Buckeyes 56, Sparty 22.
56-22. Okay. Got it. I've got Ohio State 45, Sparty 20. I did the same as you. I felt like, 50 seems a little high. It is Michigan State. It is a top, I'm in air quotes, a top 10 team. But I'll be conservative and say Ohio State 45, Sparty 20. And this is provided we see the same Ohio State offense that showed up against Purdue, that showed up against Indiana. You had that stretch there, 4 or 5 games where they were just, mashing opposing defenses. And, if that version of the Ohio State offense shows up, and there isn't any funny business like there was against Nebraska or Penn State, I think it could be a name your score affair. But Buckeyes 45, Sparty 20. I was just going to say real quick, I just don't see, like you, a team ranked in the 111th in total defense, 130 in passing yards allowed, to be able to hang for 4 quarters with Ohio State, on the road, and not just, the best offense in the country, probably the most explosive offense in Ohio State history. I think that's just a really tall order. And, I've seen some folks compare this game to the 2015 game because of where these teams are ranked right now in the playoff rankings. That 2015 game, I mean, a lot of differences to that season compared to this one. But Michigan at the time was ranked number 9. Ohio State was number 3. But that was a veteran Michigan State team, the core of which had been together for a long time. That was peak D'Antonio. He was, 8 seasons in. It was during that 3-year stretch between 2013 and 2015 where Michigan State went 36-5, won 2 Big Ten titles. I don't know, in year 2 of Mel Tucker, I made reference to this earlier. I just don't think that's where this program is right now. Maybe they can get there in another couple of years, but right now, I don't think they're ready to win a game like this. Sorry, Paige, you were going to make a point. Go ahead.
So give me your prediction again, your score prediction.
45-20 Ohio State, which feels a little conservative now that I say it.
Okay. So let's play a little game here. And
Okay.
I like you, right? Like you rely on history a lot. Like I'll never forget being at Bayside with Sloaner in whatever 1998 and watched when we were number 1 with Joe Germain and we lost that game to Michigan State and we still have PTSD with that. So let's do a little exercise here.
Yeah.
Take away the team, right? If you can in your brain and the number 7 ranking.
Okay.
Team. And I told you that Ohio State was going to play a game this weekend in Columbus against the 111th ranked. And I wrote this down because you just said defense and the worst pass defense in the country.
Right.
Do you really think Ohio State's only going to score 45 points?
You're probably right. No, I mean, if you look at it from that, you just strip away the names on the jerseys and, the rankings next to the names and just look at those stats right there. No, I mean, like I said, 45 seems conservative, but I'm throwing it out there just, because college football can be weird. It's November. It's cold. It's who knows. Yeah. No, weirder things have happened in this series, but you make a good point. No, I mean, so what was yours again? 56-22?
56-22. And I'm trying, I mean, I could make a case for 65.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, they could have done that to Purdue last week. They took a knee at the 5-yard line with, 2 minutes to go. They could have punched that in to make it 66 something.
Yeah.
66 to 31. And they elected not to. And that, by the way, that Purdue team handled Sparty. And that Purdue team really, I don't want to say blew them out, but that wasn't much of a football game.
No.
Yeah. So,
I mean, we'll watch. We'll be completely wrong on this. The other interesting thing is, what is the game plan? Is Ryan Day just, hey, you know what, guys, we're going to pass the ball 75 times because, I mean, like in his career, will he ever play the worst ranked pass defense ever again? Like, like some level.
Unless it's in the non-conference, right? And September week 2.
Right. Yeah.
What are the chances that it's
like even Akron probably has a better secondary than Sparty.
They do. I mean, if we're looking at the rankings right now. Yeah. So, okay. Well, we both feel pretty comfortable about this one. We'll see. It always makes me a little nervous when I'm like, I'm feeling comfortable. I'm anxious to see how the defense responds this week because they, I think even they would admit wasn't their best effort last week. No. And they had been showing steady progress every week since the Oregon game, which I was really happy to see. And I'd like to see them get back on track. I think it's important they get back on track, even if the offense is unstoppable and it doesn't really seem to matter. I want to see a better effort out of the defense, and it may help, as you pointed out, Paige, that they're just Michigan State's a better matchup for our defense. Being a bit more of a play action passing team that relies heavily on the run. But I want to see how those linebackers. Right.
It's a good point. Yeah, they need to play better.
Yeah, not just for this Saturday, but beyond for the future here in their playoff prospects. I want to see how these linebackers deal with Walker III. Now you've got Steel Chambers now as a starter, and I'm looking for a better effort out of the linebackers.
This is like to the linebackers, right? Like this is like a tough Borland game for Tommy Eichenberger, right? Like,
right.
Like this is what this guy was, built to do, right? And Walker will get his, right? He'll probably end up with 100, but just limit him, right?
Yeah.
And take away what they do best, make them beat you some other way. But I think to your point, right? I think the defense does need to step up. It wasn't great last weekend. I'm giving them a complete pass, like we talked about before.
Right.
But okay, that was a one-off. Now you need to step up and, they need to shut this team down. They'll get a few points, but I think it is important that they, fix what, was so wrong or conceivably wrong last weekend.
Yeah. The issue I had with last weekend's approach was they were dropping 8 a lot into coverage and only sending 3. And I could understand the logic there because, they throw so much and they have what they line up with 4 or 5 receivers in their formations and stuff. But to me, the one thing that Ohio State does at a high level is get after the quarterback. So if your game plan neutralizes the one thing that your defense does well, I think that's a flawed game plan. I hope they don't do that again. I hope they really send their pass rush after Peyton Thorne and just live with the results, because I think we've got enough of a sample size that, we know Zach Harrison, Tyreek Smith, those guys are eventually going to get home, and they're going to, they may give up a little bit, but they're going to make some plays too. Ohio State still leads the country in defensive touchdowns, and you can't neutralize the strength of your defense in the way that they did against Purdue. You got to get after the quarterback and just live with the results. You got to, and you also have to trust. You got to trust the guys on the back end to make some plays too. They got some good corners. I know they're a little shaky there at safety, but I don't know. Just play to your strengths. Live with the results.
It's a total fan perspective, right? Because we the guy's completing 70% of his passes, and we're pulling our hair out in theory, right? Not in actuality for you and I, but, right? You're like, there's only one object. And Ryan Day says this kind of a lot. It's like, we're just trying to win the game, right? All you have to do is win the game, right? It's like, we'll give you 600 yards. If you make if you have two bad turnovers, right?
Game's over. Yeah.
It's a boat race, right? And which is exactly what they did. So, the game plan is the game plan, even though you could poke holes in it. At the end of the day, they still won by 28. And what do we care if they give up 500 points? You don't raise the trophy. What Pro Football Focus says your secondary is ranked
that's true
in the country.
Right.
So you win it by winning the games. And so, it's different from, I think, their perspective than it is from our perspective. As frustrating as that can be as a fan, I wonder how they look at it, though. I don't think they would look at it the same way.
My friend Dan made a pretty good point about the approach by the Ohio State defense, which was that they got out to the big lead. Then, they dropped 8, they only rushed 3, but what that prevented was the quick strike and the big play. And they made Purdue string together 10 play drives, a 13 play drive, eat clock. I mean, they got to, they racked up the yards and they were able to get into the end zone, but they ate up a lot of clock in the process. And on the other, when Ohio State had the ball, they were boom, boom, scoring, 4 plays, 2 plays, I'm just looking at, 1 play. They had a 1 play drive after a fumble. That was the Travion Henderson long touchdown run. After that, later on, they had a 2 play touchdown drive. And then they had a 4 play touchdown drive. If Ohio State's scoring like that, they're making their opponent drive the length of the field, 10 to 13 play drives, eat a bunch of clock. They seem satisfied with that. And I can understand that as a viable game plan too.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we did a good job here, buddy, looking at this game pretty much from every conceivable angle. There's one other game I'm kind of curious about. I wanted to get your take on. Oregon. They travel to Salt Lake City to play Utah, and they are actually a 3.5 point dog in that game. This is number 3 Oregon at number 23 Utah. Has already lost 3 times, but they're now a 3-point dog in that game. Oregon is. I'll be interested to watch that game. It's because, Oregon, I think it's just a tough matchup for them. Vegas likes Utah in this game. I think it's very interesting. What do you think? Is Oregon just going to kind of keep chugging along, or do you think they're going to meet their eventual demise, kind of like what Oklahoma ran into last week against Baylor?
Wow. Talk about no clue. Utah, the last few years is a legit program, right? Yeah. Obviously, they're pretty good. And I'd never, ever, ever, when Vegas tells you something, you need to listen to what Vegas is saying.
Yeah.
And Oregon has struggled a little bit recently.
Yeah, they have. They weren't impressive last week, too, against Washington State. They had it was a 1-score game midway through the fourth quarter. They eventually pulled away and made the final score look a little more impressive than it was. But, they've been playing that game, for several weeks in a row now.
Yeah. And so honestly, I have no opinion. What strikes me though is what is really fun about college football is, and it doesn't matter either way, right?
Right.
But it was fun, when we needed certain things to happen, not only, for Ohio State, right? God, we need so-and-so to lose, right? And then we come back in there, right? Ohio State wins out. We know they're in.
Right. But it is still fun to watch the dominoes ahead of them fall, right?
It's totally fun. But where I'm going with this is, do we care? Do we care if Oregon wins or loses? I think we do, right? We still want Oregon to win. And what I think would be great is, if Bama plays Georgia close in the SEC championship game, they're both getting in. We would then, and if Oregon wins out and we went out, then you could have 2 rematches, right?
That's true.
You would have 1-4 Georgia, Bama, and then 2-3 Oregon. That would be awesome. So for that reason, I'm rooting for Oregon, but to be a 3-point dog on the road, that's pretty surprising.
That's crazy. Yeah, I guess I just want to get Ohio State out of that 4 spot and a first round matchup with Georgia, right? But yeah, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. But hey, we're fans. We can look ahead, right? We don't have to prepare for a game against Michigan State. So I think that's a very interesting game to watch. Michigan visits Maryland, who stinks. We know this. But they're only a 15-point favorite in this game. And maybe it's just because of the way Michigan plays. They rely heavily on defense and running the ball, and they're just not very explosive, and they kind of just grind you down. They grind the opponent down no matter who the opponent is. But I thought that was kind of interesting that they're only a 15-point favorite in that game. I don't expect Maryland to win, but that line stood out to me as one that seemed a little low, even for Michigan.
I don't know if you have it handy, but it seems to me that Michigan has just had the easiest schedule of all time.
I can look it up. Yeah.
Have they played anybody?
No, I mean
Washington, I think in the non-conference, but they're not any good.
They had a nice win last week at Penn State. I thought I'd give them a little bit of credit. I thought they were going to blow that one. Well, you and I both thought they would lose that game.
Yeah.
And it looked like they might. I mean,
they could have easily.
They could have, but they actually had kind of a nifty play call there. Their tight end on that crossing route to spring him for. But no, to your point, Michigan really has not played anybody. They opened with Western Michigan, then Washington, who we thought might have been good, who stinks. Northern Illinois, they killed. Then Rutgers, who they struggled with. Now they beat Wisconsin at Wisconsin, and at the time that looked like Wisconsin was down. That's looking like a nice win, and they won that game by 3 touchdowns. I still kind of feel like. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure how good Wisconsin actually is. People are like, well, they're playing really well. I go, well, is that because they already played Notre Dame, Penn State, and Michigan and lost all 3 of those games, and now they just get to beat up on the Big Ten West?
Yeah. Stop.
Yeah, and then probably the best team they played so far was Michigan State, and they lost that game.
Right.
So. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is for sure. We're rooting for Michigan on this one.
Yeah, I agree.
Come on, baby. Don't blow it.
Don't
right? Because it's all the luster off next week.
Yeah, totally. But probably the most intriguing game of the afternoon is Charleston Southern at Georgia. Of course, I'm kidding. I mean, but this is what the infamous FCS school that the SEC schedules right before their rivalry game. I hate this. This is such chicken shit. But whatever. I mean, look at this. Ohio State is playing the 7th ranked team in the country. Now, whether we actually believe or not that Michigan State's that good, still way, way, way better than Charleston Southern, and a game that, could totally derail Ohio State's season if they don't play well. And Georgia schedules this game. I know Bama does this. All the heavyweights in the SEC do this the second to last week of the season. It drives me nuts that they do
ridiculous. This. I mean, how could that university even have a football team? How is it even possible?
What's the point of playing this game? I mean, I know other than to donate $1 million or whatever the payout is to the Charleston Southern Athletic Program. I hate these games. I think these should be disallowed. I hate that. And then lastly, I don't know. Hey, look, Bama's been shaky all year long. And now they're hosting Arkansas, number 21 Arkansas, who has a pulse. They don't suck. They're 7-3. The committee likes them. They're number 21. Although, it could be that the committee's propping Arkansas up to improve Bama's resume. You never know with the committee. But I don't know. Bama's a 20.5-point favorite in this game. Again, it's in Tuscaloosa, but who knows? With the way Bama's played this year, this could maybe turn into an interesting game.
I mean, that's just an indictment of just shitty games. The 10th week of the season? Like, really, that's it? Like, Ohio State, Michigan State, and that's it? Oregon at Utah? Like, come on, that's a joke. Right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's going to be this rivalry Saturday clasm that happens next week. And then of course, championship week, but I agree with you. I mean, the Big Ten seems to be the only conference that's putting on any decent games the week before. There is an interesting game also happening with Cincinnati. They're home against SMU, who's 8-2. SMU, pretty powerful, offense, pretty explosive, within the context of that conference. Since he's only an 11.5-point favorite, they've had some close calls too. It'll be interesting to see if they can escape. I don't know. I kind of feel like there could be one unexpected, kind of interesting result out of all the games that we mentioned. It feels like.
Who does Baylor play this weekend? I think Baylor's pretty good, by the way.
I do too. Now the Baylor's problem. Well, they travel to Kansas State. That can always be a tricky game. Kansas State is a 1-point favorite in that game.
Wow.
K-State's 7-3. Baylor's now they're 8-2. They just hammered Oklahoma last week.
That's a good game. That's a good game. Yeah.
Good potential trap game there for Baylor coming off the big win over Oklahoma. So I don't know, interesting games. It's not the best slate, but there's some interesting stuff that could happen there out of all that.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Well, hey, listen, this is a great effort for a Thursday. I think we're coming up on about 45, 50 minutes.
Love it.
You got anything else you want to say about Ohio State or action on Saturday before I let you go?
No, I think, again, just everyone keep an eye out for Chad. We're kind of worried about it.
We're going to see his face in a milk carton here before too long, right?
Yeah, either that or the craps table at the
end. All right, my friend. Well, hey, thanks again for making the time. Have a great night, and we'll catch up next week. Okay, buddy? You've been listening to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and visit our website at southstandsosu.com.